Hello and welcome to Anderson English. I'm going to be annotating today Mother Any Distance by Simon Armitage. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more videos doing similar English style annotation and analysis. So I'm going to assume that you've already read the poem. I'm just going to go straight into it. It's called Mother Any Distance and it's actually taken from the Book of Matches, which is an anthology of poetry by Simon Armitage. So let's get straight into analysis of the first stanza. I'll read the first stanza. It says, Mother, any distance greater than a single span requires a second pair of hands. You come to help me measure windows, pelmets, doors, the acres of walls, the prairies of the floors. And I think initially what I'll do in this first part of the video, I'm going to go over the first two stanzas. And it might be worth looking at the rhyme scheme. Now here we have span and hands, which is really a half rhyme. And then you have doors and floors. So it goes A, B, B. And you have that fairly similarly throughout this. So thinking of the rhyme and the use of enjambment in this poem is something that will stand you in good stead. And definitely worth thinking about in terms of how it relates to the relationship between the mother and the narrator. So we'll talk more about that as we go through. Now it starts off with the word mother, and you might think that's a little bit of a cold term. Perhaps most of us would be more comfortable calling our mother mum. So I don't know what that says, whether you feel that's a close distance or not, in terms of an initial window into the bond that they have. Mother, any distance greater than a single span. And a span can vary from your finger to your thumb, or different spans between, say, any 2 points. But he's saying that any distance greater than a single span, and we'd assume that generally he's talking about his hand. This is a short distance here. And he's saying that any short distance requires a second pair of hands. And what you have for the first time is the idea that he is dependent on his mother for support. It says, you come to help me measure windows. So he addresses her, and it's directly to her. So we've got the second person here. It's a bit early to say what we think about that. You come to help me measure windows, pelmets, doors, the acres of the walls. Now, these particular, these windows and the pelmets and the doors, the walls and the floors, suggest to us that he is moving house or moving location. What's interesting, I think one of the key things that's worth noting about this is really the way in which he uses these large terms to describe the process of moving, the exaggeration that he uses. So he says acres, and he says prairies, and he exaggerates the distances in his house. And you might want to think about why that is. Why does he call them prairies, which is grassland, and acres? And I had this conversation with my classes, and it's probably because to him it might demonstrate perhaps a sense of anxiety. He's worried when he moves away, and when he moves away from his mother and this new environment, it feels larger than it really is because of how close he is to his mother. So that's pretty straightforward. I think that first stanza is fairly straightforward. Maybe other things to notice are the use of enjambment. You have enjambment here. Anything greater than a single span requires a second pair of hands. And then you have enjambment here as well. These two sentences run on. And it's something that's a feature throughout the whole poem. Okay, then let's move on. Then again, this direct address, you at the zero end, me with the spool of tape, recording length, reporting meters, centimeters back to base, then leaving up the stairs, a line still feeding out, unreeling years between us, anchor, kite. So, some key linguistic points here worth analysing. He says to his mother that she is at his zero end, and you can imagine his mother at the base of the stairs or somewhere in the flat, and he's walking away with this measuring tape. And as he does so, he's unreeling the measuring tape, and he's using that as a metaphor for the changing transition in their relationship. as he moves away from her. The zero end, I think, is an interesting term because I think it suggests that she's been there from birth. She's been there from the start of their relationship. And that would indicate a closeness. Someone who's there for you for a long time, dedicated to you, loyal to you, suggests that you are close. You at the zero end, me with the spool of tape. So she stays fixed while he moves around. And again, this idea, the zero end, her staying fixed, I think links in nicely with this idea of the bass. And I'll come to that in a second. Recording length. Okay, reporting length, reporting meters. Reporting, that's a phrase you might associate with the army. Reporting meters, centimeters back to base. Okay, and what do we think of when you think of a base going back to base? Well, in terms of the army, it's somewhere safe, it's stable. Then leaving up the stairs, the line still feeding out. The line still feeding out. Now he calls it a line at this point, which I think is an interesting word choice here. And really, he's called it before a spool of tape, but it's a line this time. And he has this line that's feeding out. And that is a play on words. You can feed out a line as it unreels, and also the feeding. I think this links here to the umbilical cord. Again, describing that close bond between them, and that links in with the idea of birth as well. Okay? Unreeling years between us. So as he moves away from her, he's moving. He's losing time with her. It's almost like that bond is disappearing in front of his eyes, and that's quite sad. Unreeling years between us. And then you have this lovely, clear and straightforward two visual metaphors, two short sentences for emphasis, and he says anchor, kite. And I think that this is one of the central quotations from the poem, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So here you have these two visual metaphors, the anchor and the kite, and I suggest you pause the video now and think about the significance of those two visual metaphors. What do you associate with those two? What is their function? Where do you usually see them? And is there any ambiguity in these two objects? Okay, so what do you think Simon Armitage is suggesting about his relationship with his mother from these two visual metaphors? Try your best to squeeze the quotation. Try and get everything you can out of it, and I'll deal with that in a bit more detail in part 2. Thank you so much for watching. See you soon.